Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of my interview series. Today, I've got Olivia Plotnick from Why Social. Olivia is based in Shanghai and fairly recently started up her own business, Why Social. It's a social media agency focused on Wechat, helping brands run and execute and strategize on their WeChat and other social media platforms in China. So, Olivia, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been watching these episodes, so I'm excited to finally get to chat with you.
Great. Thank you. So I think today the focus is really on smaller brands coming into China looking to maximize their investment and their impact on social platforms in China. So I think probably the first thing I wanted to talk about is why social and why did you set it up and what gap were you plugging?
Yeah, why social,
know,
right? I teed that one up perfectly. No, so I started my career here in Shanghai. So I've been working for marketing agencies, and really, I mean, what a place to start out in marketing and communications. I think it's probably the most fast-moving, exciting marketplaces in the world, and I really just became fascinated with how people are using social media, the ecosystems here, and really, just watching the evolvement of social and e-commerce, and retail in this space. So after working for some big agencies, I just, for a number of reasons, wanted to try it out on my own. I had been working with a lot of communities in my spare time, helping them with their social media. And so I built up quite a brand around that. So in June of 2019, I started my own company. And since then, we've helped about 20 brands with their social media marketing in China. So, of course, a lot of people come into us for WeChat, but we also help them, with Xiaohongshu, Weibo, and actually, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. So we can get into that a bit later, but yeah, it's been very, very exciting. It's a great time. I think China has a huge amount of opportunity, especially for a lot of these smaller brands that we work with. It's been really exciting just in the past 2 to 3 years to see how the market is really evolving. Chinese consumers are incredibly well informed, they're incredibly digitally savvy, and they're really starting to look for these brands with amazing stories, brands who really are very purpose driven. So that's a lot of the clients that we work with, is these very purpose driven brands. So in the space of sustainability or plant-based products or social impact. So it's been really, really exciting to work with these brands and to watch them grow and to watch the market grow as well.
It's a great space to be in, both from the dynamism of the market, but also, as you said, like being able to work with these sort of exciting new brands. So for these smaller brands coming into the market, obviously, as you rattled off there are so many channels, and it can be quite overwhelming. Also, from a budget perspective, it can be quite expensive to be on different channels. What would be your advice? Should they try and go on all the main ones, or should they focus? What's sort of the general strategy that you have?
So, I think right from the get-go, it's going to be important to kind of put into your mind that China is going to be more expensive and take longer than you expected. I think a lot of brands see China as a huge opportunity, but fail to kind of see that, okay, you're going to have to put in a lot of investment and a lot of work. And there's, as you mentioned, a lot of social media platforms, so it can get overwhelming really, really quickly. If you are, a smaller beauty brand, I think first you have to look at, okay, who are you going to target? Like, where is your audience? Because China is so incredibly different. And I know people on here have talked about this before, but, just to reiterate, because it is super crucial when you're deciding what platforms to be on. Are your consumers in first-tier cities or second-tier cities? Even those are quite similar in size, but different in makeup and different in what platforms they're actually using. So once you get down to the nitty-gritty of that, you can kind of narrow down which channel you're going to be on, because of course, the more channels you're on, the more resources that's going to use up and the more budget. So a lot of the brands that we work with have quite a limited budget. So we're trying to put them on the most impactful channels. Now, when it comes to actually, okay, what should those channels be? What does that look like? You may have heard of TikTok, or Douyin, as we call it in China. And that's a platform that a lot of brands come to us and they're like, okay, it's super hot right now. It's really popular. Like, we got to get on this channel. And that's where we really come in and say, okay, let's take a step back and let's look at this, and let's look at where your consumers are, because Douyin, could be really great for a brand who's looking to target people, more in a second or third tier city, but maybe not so much in a first tier city. So the behaviors and the channels are just going to be totally different. Now, the channels that let's focus on one area and say that you are coming in and you're focusing on consumers in a first tier city. WeChat, while it's getting harder and harder, and it is not going to be the platform to grow on, you still need to have an official account, because it's going to be one of the best platforms to really nurture that audience that you pull in from other areas. Channels like Xiaohongshu, which is a little bit like, Yelp and Instagram and Amazon reviews. That's a really great channel actually to be able to work with influencers on. So, I'm sure you've heard and talked about KOLs on here, which are key opinion leaders. We also talk about key opinion customers, which is a lot of what we focus on for the small brands that we work with. Usually they have a smaller, more engaged audience. And what they can do is really help you amplify your brand. Because, as with any social media platform, even in the West, that putting out content is a very slow way to grow. But in the West, you have Instagram and Facebook, which relatively cheap still for a paid post. Like, you can boost a post on Instagram for $5 and you can still get pretty good results. In China, that's just not the case with any platform. It's very, very expensive and the targeting is not very good. So you really kind of, you have no other option, basically. You need to be working with these KOC. So you can send out, your product, basically do product seeding with a lot of KOC. And especially, for like a very niche or like, a small indie brand, these influencers, they're looking for interesting content to make. So it's actually can be quite beneficial to them as well if you, send them a PR package. They want to be talking about interesting products. They want to be the first ones who are uncovering a new brand. So if you angle it in that way, I think you're going to have an easier time engaging with them. So that's really kind of for awareness. And the really amazing thing about Chinese consumers is that they do so much research about brands before they make a purchase. So each channel has a different purpose. So let's say, you've worked with an influencer on Xiaohongshu. If a user, sees your brand, they're going to search for it on a bunch of other different platforms. So let's say they go into WeChat and search for your brand, and start to follow your official account. Then that's where you start to, nurture that relationship. You should have a WeChat mini program on there where they could be able to buy your products. Another really important thing, which I think a lot of brands kind of forget, if you're on Taobao or Tmall, that is also kind of almost like a social media channel. Even though it's your e-commerce, you still need to be checking people's comments on there, responding quickly, because consumers are going to go to those different touch points and look before they make a purchase. So, we've talked about Xiaohongshu, we've talked about WeChat. I also want to mention actually YouTube and Instagram, which, yes, they are blocked in China. But if we're talking, for example, about consumers in a first-tier city, a lot of them, many of them, if they're post-90s consumers, they've probably studied abroad, they're extremely international, they're probably going to have an Instagram account, or they're probably going to use YouTube. And there are a lot of Chinese content creators, either within China or outside of China, who are creating content in Chinese about brands. So it's really worth looking into these influencers and engaging with them, on YouTube and on Instagram. And the thing about people on YouTube creating content, that content is getting copied onto Bilibili, which is like a video platform in China. So, start out with the influencer on YouTube, and then it's going to get repopulated to content elsewhere. So I think those are kind of the main platforms. Of course, like you mentioned, there are so many others. But if you're just coming in and you're looking to, maximize your budget, that's what I would suggest at first, or kind of an overview of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I think that although it's not, I guess brands might want a silver bullet and say, okay, we just need to use one platform. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. Based on what you said, and of course, all the, the touch points. As you said, they do a lot of research. They need to have multiple touch points to have that trust. To have the social proof to buy products. So I think that's why, you absolutely do have to do those key channels. So I guess that leads me to my next question. How do you optimize content across different channels? Because it is definitely not as simple as posting the same content on, reposting. That's all, the formats are completely different. There's a lot of things that would mean that doesn't work. But how do you help brands to sort of streamline that process?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, again, not like Facebook and Instagram where you can even in the same like scheduler just, click each box and it has a post to each, which would be so great. But no, I think, and especially because we do work with smaller brands. So ideally you're creating specialized content for each platform. It might be similar, but you're creating different types of assets. But if your budget is limited, you're not going to have the freedom to do that, quite frankly. So what we try and help our brands do, the bulk of the content is going to go into a WeChat post. You're going to need photos, you're going to need great copy for that. So that's kind of, where the bulk of your assets are going to be created for. And then a lot of times we help them kind of adapt that, for something like Xiaohongshu. So we kind of help them follow, a similar schedule for those two platforms. And then, follow a similar schedule if they're using Instagram, kind of a similar schedule with Xiaohongshu, like that. So it's definitely not ideal. If I was, talking to a massive brand, we'd be talking about developing different types of video, and but the reality is like you have to be very fickle with what you have. So kind of starting from WeChat, because that's going to be the bulk of it, and then saying, okay, what can I reuse from this post on other channels?
Yeah, and I think that makes complete sense. It's pragmatic, but also with a hint of realism about the market and the demands of the consumer.
Yeah,
their demands.
And it is what it is. Like, yeah,
because the big brands do invest so much and have such sophisticated marketing systems.
Right. And it's so expensive photography, that everything adds up so quickly, and I'm very aware of that, and I think a lot of the brands are very aware of it too. So you have to, and that's where a lot of the planning and strategy comes in, is that you have to be very, very careful about when you're planning out what type of posts that you are doing, because you need to be thinking, okay, if I'm going to do one photo shoot, how can I make that last throughout different channels? And last as long as it can, if your resources are limited. So that's really where the strategy and the planning comes in, instead of just thinking like, oh, we're going to push out a post about our new products, or we're, once we have this announcement, we're going to push it out. You're going to end up just, like digging yourself into a hole, or just doing so much more work than you really needed to if you didn't, plan it out ahead of time to how you're going to get all that content.
Okay, so then the next thing that I wanted to talk about is WeChat private groups, because I think that international brands coming in, especially smaller ones, I talk to brands quite a lot about this. They've heard about the success of Perfect Diary, of Little Ondine, of all these, local brands that are really using WeChat private groups to engage with the consumer, to create a community on a small scale. But it's also, it seems intangible because it's so much work, it sounds like so much work across, splitting consumers up, being very bespoke. So I know you said to me that you do that with some of your brands. So just be interested to hear how that could work for like an international beauty brand coming in, and what advice.
Yeah, so I think the beauty of these WeChat groups really comes in is because, WeChat is not a great like CRM tool. You can't really pull the information from your followers out and get their email and then follow up with email newsletters. Like, it's just not a great ecosystem for that. So where a lot of brands have found success is using these private traffic WeChat groups. And how we kind of start this out with our clients is thinking about it as another channel, which people are like, oh, great, another channel, another thing I have to create content for. But you're really building a community in this channel. So you're kind of repurposing what you're doing with your WeChat official account. And why these are so important is because it's getting harder and harder to actually get somebody to follow an official account. So the average WeChat user, data from 2019 suggested that they're only following about 20 official accounts, which is crazy when you think about it. There's over 20 million official accounts. So you can assume that, people really aren't following many brands on WeChat. But what we find is actually with these private traffic groups, we will have people in there who are super engaged. They will read the posts that are shared. They will purchase the product, but they're not following the official account. So these groups are, really important to actually keep your users engaged and keep pulling people in. And, on the groups, they have a very specific purpose. So it's important, it does take a bit of community managing, but this is something, that's great for like an intern to do. And you just kind of schedule out content that you're going to post in there. So what we've done actually for one of the beauty brands that we work with is, each week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, we'll share an image of, some tips about, how to use the mask, or tips about what type of ingredient is good for what. And we always include, the mini program QR code on that image for people to scan in and go to the mini program to check out the products. So it's another kind of subtle way to get people, into your funnel and convert them. It doesn't have to be, I think people hear like a chat group and they think, oh my God, we have to be always on. In general, people aren't really expecting for you to always be talking to them. It's too much. Like people, WeChat users just receive way too many messages every day. It's more of something, that you're active in, maybe, a couple times per week, maybe like 3 to 5 times per week, you're engaging in there. And we really, especially with the beauty brand who we've done this with, they have built out such an engaged community. They don't have 20,000 WeChat followers, but they have such an engaged core of customers that, when they do a special promotion or when they do an event, there is such affinity towards the brand. Like everybody is converting within a matter of minutes. So it's really a way to create this really strong personal relationship with people, because on WeChat or these other channels, it's just a lot more difficult to do that from a business account. So going through it kind of from this personal way is going to be, I think really impactful. And as as it gets harder and harder for brands on official accounts to get your content read, these groups are a great place to share your content in, to get people to pull in other like-minded users. So it's, of course, it's another channel, it's more work, of course. But I do think that it's really vital in building up a very healthy and very strong community. I always tell our clients, like, I would much rather have you, receive 500 followers who are super engaged, they love the brand, than 5,000 followers who never engage, they don't open anything, they're not interacting, because that doesn't mean anything for your business in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think being able to have that two-way communication through a WeChat private group is crucial. And I think obviously the big brands, they tend to have multiple, right? They have different.
Yeah, thousands. I think Perfect Diary must have literally thousands of WeChat groups.
Thank you so much, Olivia. It was so great to hear about why social, hear about a lot of tips that smaller brands can really take away and think about when it comes to a social media strategy. I think the overall takeaway is there are certain channels that are non-negotiables in terms of consumers feeling comfortable with your brands, but you can be smart with how you use the content and how you interact with consumers, specifically through WeChat private groups potentially as well. So thank you. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always great to reach out. You can visit our website at www.waisocial, or you can reach out to us at hello@ysocial.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Olivia. And
yeah, thank you.
Keep in touch.